Well, I couldn't just leave this one alone forever. Abigail Thorn's The Prince. I had to talk about this because I I had an insecurity existential breakdown out of fear of watching this. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a video on the main channel sort of detailing what that was. But yeah, I needed to see this eventually. Now, if for some reason you didn't watch that video that I just mentioned, short version is, because of a lot of weird hangups and my own insecurities about my own creative output and where I'm at in my life, I kind of had a view going into this where I don't just want it to be good, I kind of needed it to be great. Thankfully, enough time has passed since I did that original video, and honestly, I think making that video was a very cleansing experience for me. And so I just kind of got in a better place, which is good because while I like it, I don't love it. It is good. I don't think it's great. And it's going to be difficult to try and explain why that is. I'll give you the briefest of overviews, and then I'm just going to talk with no consideration for whether or not I'm hitting spoilers. So the briefest overview is that this is kind of a meta narrative dealing with Shakespeare, but it's also about being trans. That's not really subtext. That's right out front. And it's also kind of a multiverse. Yeah, there's a bit of stuff going on here. So simplified, as simple as I can make it. We primarily focus initially on two trans women, one named Sam, one named Jen, who are they're just in the world of Shakespeare. Henry IV, Part 1, to be specific. And apparently it's possible for just ordinary people to just end up in these universes where the events of Shakespeare just happen on loop. And in the case of Sam, she has found like a map to be able to navigate from play to play to play to try and finally get a way out. Jen is more of a new arrival, so Sam is trying to bring her up to speed. And they are now currently in Henry IV, Part 1, which is where the exit is. And so as all this is going on, and Jen is just trying to wrap her head around this, there is the ongoing events of Henry IV, Part 1, in which Abigail Thorn, who is the writer of the play, this is all available on Nebula, who is not sponsoring this, just to be clear. She is playing the character of Hotspur in Henry IV, Part 1, and there ends up being a bit of a connection between her and Jen that makes Hotspur start to really doubt and question himself. I say himself because of how the character is identifying at the start of the story, the start of the narrative. It doesn't remain himself for what should be obvious reasons. Again, being played by possibly the most well-known trans woman in the UK. Not the most well-known trans person. That's probably still Susie. She added Susie. I can't remember if it's Susie Eddie Izzard or Eddie Susie Izzard was where she said to place it. Anyways, but she's gender fluid, feminine gender fluid, rather like myself, actually. Whereas Abigail is a trans woman. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but it is ultimately very clear in its intention and its themes and the parallels that it's drawing, which is good. And there's a lot of humor in it as well, with the breaks in the narrative and the way that Sam and especially Jen kind of just rub up against and bounce off what is supposed to be happening in the play. So it gets a little bit of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead in there, although not Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead was an existential journey through the lives of supporting characters in that story, whereas this isn't really doing that, but it does sort of hit some similar humor notes in terms of characters who are aware of what it is that is going on. So, and as I said, overall, it is good. My main note on it, and this may not be an issue for everyone, it was for me, which is that you can tell that this was written by someone who has a deep, deep love of Shakespeare, which on the one hand is good, because if you're going to integrate those stories in a meaningful way and cross them over and play off what's actually in the play itself, you need a really strong knowledge of it. But it's not just a knowledge of Shakespeare, it's a deep love of Shakespeare. And I do think that as it goes on, that starts to be a hindrance to the actual story that's being told. There are long, protracted sessions that are just lifted directly from the play. Now, I'm not saying that to be like, and that's lazy. That I don't mean that. The ones that are chosen, that make sense, but because most of these scenes play out in their entirety, there's a shockingly high percentage of this that is just Henry IV Part 1 with some atypical casting that lends different perspective on the line meanings, which, to be honest, is something you can get from any performance company that just does atypical casting for a Shakespeare show. When it does, or rather, how much of the play is that, or at least seemed like that to me. I should stress, Henry IV Part 1 is not a Shakespeare play I know especially well. So it is possible that some of the scenes that I took as being wholesale lifted actually had some minor touches and tweaks to make it work better. That's possible, and I may not be aware of them. But kind of my point is, unless you know that play front to back, you're probably not going to be able to tell. And a lot of these extended scenes feel like you're just watching Henry IV. And as it went on and that stuff kept happening, and it kept happening for extended stretches, I started to get frustrated with it. It was fine at the front end because my expectation was, okay, we start with a lot more of the Henry IV stuff. We get a couple of interruptions, but then it'll taper off and this newer narrative will take over. And that happened a little, but not nearly to the extent that I would have preferred, because it keeps coming back to these extended scenes from Henry IV itself. And I remember thinking, yeah. But that's not what I'm hooked into right now. And I wanted more deviations, more breaks, more clearly new material. And again, I don't think it's leaning on Henry IV to the degree that it does out of any kind of laziness. I think it is out of a love of that material and a seeing that material fitting the themes that are in The Prince overall as a story. I do believe that very fully. But my note would still be trim some of it back, because after a while I started to zone out. When the Shakespeare scenes went on for minutes and minutes and minutes, like even into the second act, I started to zone. I'm like, okay, we're in Shakespeare mode again. And this might just be a me problem. I suspect someone with a deeper knowledge of Shakespeare might be more appreciative of this. I don't know what it would be like for someone who doesn't really know Shakespeare at all. I don't have that perspective. I can't speak to it. But I should be clear, the performances are quite good. It's basically an 8-person show, and out of the 8 actors, 3 of them are trans women, or trans feminine people at the very least. Their characters are trans women. And I rather enjoyed how immediately Jen could tell that Hotspur was a woman, and that he didn't know that, or he didn't accept that and wasn't prepared to confront that, because that's not an uncommon trans experience for other people who have a better understanding of what it is to be trans, see you and get what you're going through even if you don't. So I thought that was well done. I liked that between the three trans women in it, that there is a variety of personalities. This is one of the benefits of not just having a token sort of character to represent a group, but to have multiple members of that group. So like with trans women, because Jen is a very different personality from Sam. Sam is very kind of very reserved. You can tell like this whole thing just makes her deeply uncomfortable. Jen kind of wants to get stuck in a little bit more. And then with Hotspur, and then later on when she gets out, and actually there is they did an interesting thing where there isn't really much work done to hide Abigail's femininity, Abigail Thorn's femininity, while playing Hotspur at the very start. There's really just a shift in outfits, because at the start she's in like this full sort of breastplate that actually kind of flattens her chest, and then as the thing goes on, she's in less and less masculine signifying clothes and in more and more feminine ones, but still performing very much the same way. But then at the very, very end, this is where we're going to start getting into spoilers, if you hadn't guessed already that I'm going that way. At the very, very end, when she's out of this whole thing, and you get to hear her talk not as a Shakespeare character, you realize how soft-spoken she is. And again, it's a nice mix of personalities. None of them, I think, exceptionally stereotypical. I don't think there really is as firmly established a stereotypical trans woman persona as there is with, say, like a flamboyant gay men or bears or butch lesbians or what have you. I don't think there is as firmly established stereotypical of what a trans woman is, except for maybe having dyed hair. Reminder, not actually a trans woman, just trans feminine. But the performances are all quite good. Thorn has a lot that she has to do, and a lot of emotion that she has to bring forward, both basically playing a Shakespeare character straightforwardly, but also having to undercut a lot of it in a lot of ways. But honestly, I was most gravitated towards Sam and Jen. Jen especially. I really, really love that performance. But they were all good. And as I said, this whole thing is good. It is quite good. I do think it could use a little bit of rebalancing in terms of how much of it is just lifted from Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 1. I would have liked to have seen more original dialogue, content, and more meta notes even. It's not doing anything wrong. It's just the mix is a little off. It's like someone has cooked you something and all the ingredients they used are right, but they used a little too much oregano, and not enough salt. I don't know, something. You're not supposed to use food metaphors in criticism. I'm doing it anyway. Just gonna roll with it. That's what I did. But that's kind of what it feels like. I feel like I would love to see this refined a little bit more, but I suspect this is what Thorn wants it to be. And I'm very happy for her that she got to put it on and have it filmed and have it be viewable, because it does do a very good job of paralleling the concerns of a character who in Shakespeare is very focused on living up to what he is expected to be by those around him, to be the man everyone expects him to be, and putting a trans feminine lens on that character and on that conflict. It's intelligent. It's a very good fit. And I do hope that Thorn will continue to write and hopefully get more productions off the ground. If she is ever able to do that, I think this might end up being viewed as a stepping stone that showed the promise of what was to come later. This is quite good, but I want to see what happens next from her if she does decide to write another play. And she may not. This may be the thing that she had to get out of her system. She wants to focus on other things. That's fine. But it's good. I just want to tweak it. I just want to tinker with it. But, also as an often frustrating creative myself, that's not atypical for me, especially with theatrical things. I don't feel that too often with movies. Sometimes I do, like usually just with narrative elements, but I feel it a lot more often with plays. Like, I would love to sit in on a workshop and give notes, but instead I just get to do this. So yeah, I saw The Prince. It was not the great, to me at least, it was not the great thing I thought I needed it to be. And I'm okay with that. It is still quite good. And if you have access to Nebula, I would definitely say you should check this out. I'm not going to plug the site and be like, you should sign up just to watch this. Because again, like I said, not sponsored. So I'm not going to tell you to do that. No one's paying me to tell you to do that. But if you've already got it, definitely give this a go. And yeah, that'll be it for this time. The Prince. Did you see it on Nebula? Did you see it when it was being performed in the UK? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living and pay for Nebula so that I could watch this thing. Any amount you're able to support there is of great help. But even if you can't, like, share, subscribe also help me out. But don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. This video wouldn't have been possible without my supporters over on Patreon, and I would especially like to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Imudelki, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabe Lax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Tim Price, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, David Hall, General Contact Unit Problem Child, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. Thank you so much.